Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome back to the UltraRunning Magazine podcast. Rebecca Joyner, who attempted Western States just a weekend ago. But the headline of the day was the snow. Oh my God, the snow, and other things. But Rebecca, how did the day go for you?
Yeah, could have went better, obviously. But yeah, the snow was rough. I think for me, the altitude probably got me first, and just kept kind of slowing me down. And then the snow just added to that. I think that's usually when people time out versus DNF, it's usually a lot of little things, right, that add up versus like an injury or something going catastrophically wrong. And I think that was probably what I could chalk it up to at Western States too.
Yeah. Well, I'm so sorry that things unfolded the way that they did. I mean, the trail giveth and the trail taketh away. And you just never know. But it was a significant day for a lot of people who, like you, they had it to finish it, but it just did not go their way. And that was the one thing that we heard from everybody that I talked to was just like the snow was the story. Like, oh my God, the snow either like really affected my day. And just, yeah, that was a lot of it. So what was that experience like starting? And let's kind of start from the beginning. And then you're at States. We saw you at the expo, and then race morning comes. How are you feeling about that? Because it's such a special experience.
Right. I would say, just to start out with overall, it was such a great day. Like it was amazing. It was way better than I could have ever imagined it would have been. And in hindsight, I should have rubbed Dean Karnassus for good luck. Like maybe that was the thing, Scotty, that I should have done when he was right there and we joked about it. Maybe I should have actually done that next time.
Next time.
But yeah, so for me, like just getting up the escarpment was kind of a big like white whale for me. And I knew it was going to be long and I knew it was going to be slow, but with my asthma and stuff and it being at 9,000 feet, I was like, I just need to get up that and then we're going to work our way down. And I felt really good, like up the escarpment. I was definitely toward the back of the pack, but it wasn't last, like there were still plenty of people behind me. And I felt really strong. Like I felt like I could climb it. So a lot of kind of those doubts that I had had about climbing legs and if I was going to be able to make it really kind of went away there. So I got to the top feeling really good. And then when you go on the back side of that, I don't know how well you know it, probably very well, but it's just beautiful, right? So you actually get to that single track and it's wide open. It's just beautiful. And I kind of thought it was going to be that way for a while, like naively. And so when I came off the back, I'm like, oh, this is great, right? Like I can run this all day. It's going to be magical out here. But I did know I needed, like in my head, I was still thinking like, just get down in elevation as fast as you can, right? Like just keep making good time, get below 6,000 feet as fast as you can. So yeah, I was feeling super happy. And then we hit the snow. Which was very different from anything that I've ever dealt with in Michigan. And it's going to be, but kind of coming from a winter background, you think, well, I have enough experience in it. Like we can work with it. It's not gonna ruin my race like maybe it would some other people. But I have never seen snow like that in life. People have been asking and I say it's like running on ice BBs. Like it scatter, like your foot would go down and it would, no matter how you put your foot on, it just scattered underneath you and you were slipping and sliding, like impossible to get traction on. So again, kind of being at the back of the pack, you just start thinking like, how are people making good time on this, right? Like how are those front people getting through this so fast?
Yeah.
I would love to hear that. I would love to hear how people were able to still keep up a decent pace and run on that.
So let's talk about the snow for a bit. So it was about 20 miles of snow. That's a lot of snow to be running on, especially at the onset of a race at elevation. So you're working extra, your body's working extra, your lungs are working extra, just all that exertion. And so what was, and you mentioned something in your Instagram account about how the snow is melting. It melts much differently than it does in Michigan. You're thinking, I'm coming out to California, it's going to be beautiful. It's a sunshine state. Snow, what the hell? How could this be? How could
Yeah.
this be of all the things? But talk about the difference with the snow, the California snow and the High Sierra versus Michigan.
Yeah. So growing up in the North, one of the things that like our parents always taught us was if there's nothing under the snow, then you don't go on the snow, right? Whether it's ice or snow, because people fall through and that's how you die. So the first time I saw it, I was like, holy crap, that's like what I've been warned about my whole life. So for people that are not familiar, the snow melts from the bottom up there. So you have like these big shelves of snow that you're running on and just nothing underneath it. So you would see these post holes where people had went through and fallen, 2 to 3 feet to the snow below or to the ground below through the snow. And so in addition to having like the snow just kind of scattering under your feet, you also had to watch those edges and those places where the rivers were running through or the water was draining through, because you knew it was just going to be thinner there, right? And of all the places that you were going to post hole through, that's probably where it was going to happen. So the foot placement was a lot too. It wasn't like you could just trust everywhere that you were putting your feet because you could just crash through in a lot of those spots.
So when you're out, I can only imagine that you're in a bit of a train of folks trying to navigate the snow. Are you watching other people to see where their footfalls are coming and like, yes, that's like a yes, no sort of decision. Yes, I can do the same thing. No, I shouldn't find another path.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that because I was alone. Like almost as soon as we hit the snow, everybody just kind of disappeared, right? Like either people fell back or they went way ahead. And I was alone almost the whole day. So that first maybe 2 to 4 miles of snow section, there was another woman that was like just enough in front of me where I could keep her in my sights. She had earbuds in, which I didn't realize until I like was trying to talk to her, like, hey, I think you're going the wrong way, or do you see where the trail's going? And she can't hear me. But we worked it out eventually. But that was a big issue too, the navigation up there when you don't have anyone in front of you and you don't have anyone behind you.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden the trail juts up, 40 feet up the mountain. You don't always notice it right away, which is not to say the course markings weren't great. They were. They did a fantastic job marking the course. But again, like when you're going straight and then the trail just ends or the footprints end, you're not quite sure where to go. So yeah, you're looking up and down the mountain and kind of trying to backtrack in a lot of those places. But yeah, I mean, where she would slide on her butt, I would slide on my butt. Where you have the two tracks when you're skiing down, literally skiing down on your shoes. We would do that too. But it was nice that section of having somebody there just to kind of keep an eye on where you're supposed to end up, in the next quarter mile. But yeah, then once she was gone, it was very different too. I'm just like, oh, I got to figure this out.
So how did you figure that out? You're trying to manage your pace because you have a cutoff coming up. And you want to make sure you hit that. What was that like?
Yeah. I still at that point felt fairly confident. They had said what I had heard was the snow was only 10 miles. So I'm like, okay, we just got to get to like the first aid station, and then we're going to be done with this, right? Then we're going to make up some time. We'll start being able to run a little faster. That did not end up to be the case, kind of like you mentioned. It ended up being about 20 miles of that. So, at the time when you're in it, you're like, well, it's not going to last forever. And yes, I'm going really slow now, but I'm still moving forward as fast as I can. Like I always felt throughout the whole day, I was moving as fast as I could move. It wasn't like I wasn't taking pictures. I wasn't stopping to eat or like change, anything in my phone. So I just kept trying to be as fast as I could be safely. And the hope was, yeah, this is going to end soon and we're going to be able to make up time.
But it didn't end soon.
Not.
About how much time do you think you spent trudging through the snow?
Hard to say, right? I would say I think there was easily 5 minutes of stopping to find the trail again. Like stop, look where you are, look down the trail, look up the trail. Oh, okay, there it is. Now how do I get up there or how do I backtrack to get to it? there was definitely some time spent doing that. And then right before the 10-mile aid station, the breathing started to get super hard. So I did start slowing down a little bit there. But then when I got to the aid station, I got my inhaler out and kind of tried to get that back on track. But yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, obviously 22-minute miles, we're not going to get it done. And that's part of what a lot of those early miles were. And I would have people pass me every now and then, and say like, hey, how are we doing? Are we how you feel about the cutoff? And everyone's kind of like, oh man, it's tough. But all you could do is just keep going as fast as you could safely.
Let's talk about your lungs and altitude. For those who don't know, what's that experience like of having asthma at altitude and running a damn ultra?
Yeah. Well, it's a new diagnosis for me because I always just thought I sucked at high races and I was just really bad at it. But I had been training so much for this one. When I went to Yamacraw, and my training partner and I were doing it, there were certain climbs, the humidity was like 90%. So that takes down the available oxygen in the air. And there were times when I would have to stop. My heart rate would be 180 just on this climb, and she would be fine. And she looked at me and she goes, you don't look good, right? Like, this isn't normal. We were training together. We do the same things together. You were really suffering. And so I started to research it a little bit and then went to the doctor. And yes, I have asthma. So that kind of explains a lot of the problems that I have. So yeah, when I got to the top of the escarpment, already getting lightheaded, right? And through probably the first 15 miles of lightheadedness. And I think that's pretty common too for a lot of flatlanders. I don't think that's out of the realm of normalness. But what would happen after mile 10, after being up there for 3 or 4 hours, is every time that we had a good climb, which was pretty often, my heart rate would shoot up to 180, almost 200, and I would have to stop and just let it come down. Like, there's nothing you could do to kind of get it back down again other than stop. So there, I think, was easily another 5 minutes of time just spent on some of those climbs, and seeing again, like every now and then somebody would trickle through and they would just like go bounding by you, and crap, I'm losing so much time just having to stop and do this. And then just overall, you feel more tired. It's harder to kind of really get that air in. But again, I never felt like I was going overly slow, except for those moments where I had to really stop and get my heart rate back down.
Yeah.
So that was the frustrating part.
So what was the rest of the day like for you? It didn't go as long as you wanted it to, right. But let's talk about that.
Yeah. Do you want to still stay with like the last part of the race, or after and the ugly crying and the ride back to Auburn? Which part would you like to talk about?
Well, let's talk about not hitting your cutoff. It's a really hard thing to talk about. For some people it's no big deal. It's just part of ultra life. I've been picked up by a sweeper, my first and only 100-mile attempt, and it was really hard. It was really hard to say I'm not going to make it after all this training, all this hard work, and for me it was I had a pacer with me who just picked me up maybe 4 miles prior. I had another pacer waiting for me, and of course my honey, and all the people came out to cheer. I just felt like I'm letting all these people down, and I hate this feeling. It's the worst. But I think it's important to talk about it because there are so many people who can relate to this. So let's talk about the coming up to when you're going to get pulled from the race. Let's start from there and go forward.
Okay. So the good news is I was completely ignorant that I had missed the cutoff. So I was still having a great time on the course. I was still happy. I was still moving forward. And in my head, I had a sneaking suspicion I had missed it. But at the last aid station, they had said, just keep moving. You're going to make it. You're going to be fine. You were here 20 minutes early. You have plenty of time. Just keep moving. And I was like, oh, well, maybe they've relaxed the cutoff, right? Maybe people are going so slow.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
before you continue,
yeah.
what is the trail like at this point? Are you still in snow going to the next aid station?
So the last five, I want to say it's like 6 miles between. It was like maybe mile 20 was one aid station, and then 26 was the one where you time out. That's where the snow finally disappeared, and you got this like hella downhill. And so it was pretty dry. It was mostly like a riverbed though, like tons of rocks. Again, like not really what I'm used to, but I was getting some 13, 14-minute miles in there. So I'm like, this is great. Like we're making up a lot of time. I'm definitely still moving, like they said. And yeah, like I'm doing the math. I'm thinking like, I don't think I'm gonna make the cutoff. I don't know what they were talking about, but clearly they know something I didn't because they said I'm fine. Yeah, so was able to make up a lot of time on the downhills getting in there. And then yeah, I got there and I am ignorant of the whole thing. So I'm like getting out my water bottles to hand to the volunteers, and they got this look on their face like, oh, you timed out. It's like, oh crap, just kind of like a little bit of disbelief. But then, it took like 30 seconds to be like, well, yeah, like you knew the cutoff was, I think, like 8 hours and 30 minutes or something, and you're here at 8:40. So the really nice thing, I think most people know this about states, though, is how many volunteers they have per runner. So they they had this poor woman who was like my emotional support volunteer who came down and like sat next to me, and she was, you don't have to talk at all, but just it's fine. I'll just be here if you need anything.
Oh my gosh.
Sobbing uncontrollably, just like ugly crying because it was a surprise to me that I had timed out. And then, like you said, you get in your head about like, oh, my whole family is here, and I had like pictured what the finish line was going to be like, and my family was going to be there. My little guy was going to run through and with me at the finish line, and you just like you said, you can't believe it's over already. Because yeah, like especially in that situation where we're starting to make up time, things where you're starting to get lower in elevation, like it's gonna get better, and then to be like, no, sorry, your day's over. It was hard. And I think I had that experience once before, at Badwater, of dragging 4 people across the country to crew me and then not finishing. So that part was a little bit easier, but it was just, I think it was just the kind of the surprise of, I really thought I was going to do this. Like I really thought I had it in me. And I knew it was going to be 29 hours. Like I knew I wasn't going to be at the front, but just kind of internalizing that and being like, wow, you did everything you could do, and you just weren't fast enough. It's a new feeling. And it was what it was, right? And my crew were fantastic, like everybody's crew, are, and they're super supportive. But yeah, it's not a great feeling for sure.
Um, Sorry again. Like I just like my heart just pours out to you. Like I wish I could have been there next to you, just like saying, yeah, it's gonna be okay. You had a great volunteer with you for that moment. They really do know how to shine.
Yeah.
But can you? I don't know if I caught which aid station you were at when they said that. Yeah, that this is didn't make it.
I'm gonna say, is it Forest Hill that's 26? Which one is it? Right before Michigan Bluff.
Oh, so you made it to Devil's Thumb. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. How was that? How was that experience? Like, at least you.
I, by that point, like in the race, you had pretty much decided that if there was a high outcropping on top of something, you were going to have to go up there.
Yeah.
And you just accepted that. I'm like, oh, I see a huge, really high like pinnacle on that peak. All right, that's where we're going, right? Like, you're not going around it. They're not like detouring you around with switchbacks. You're going to have to climb up the stupid thing. So, and honestly, I was just in a good mood the whole time. Like it was so unbelievably beautiful
Yeah.
that I wasn't even irritated. Like I said, like I'm not a climber. I wasn't irritated with it at all. It was just fun and it kind of ridiculous about like the bouldering. And I'm short, so like hand over hand in some places where other people might not be. but it was just like, it was hard to get mad at the snow. It was hard to get mad at the climbs or anything because it was just so pretty and you're just so grateful to be there.
Yeah.
You know, I enjoyed every single minute of it for sure.
So your crew isn't able to be at that aid station, is that right?
Yeah, they were at 30.
Yeah. So what was that experience like getting out of there and then having to like break the news?
Yeah, well, I guess they do it with the ham radios because I had no service, which was a blessing too, really, of not having any service up there. So they had like let the crews know at mile 30, like, hey, your runner's dropped, you can pick them up in Auburn. And then you have to wait for them to break down the aid station, and you have to wait for the volunteers to be ready to go.
Oh my God, that's gotta be rough. I mean,
Yeah,
oh, that's gotta be rough to watch that.
yeah,
Didn't want this
and
experience. Didn't want
yeah.
this experience.
Right. Yeah. And it was kind of funny because there was a guy, Brian Campbell from Indiana, who had timed out with 5 minutes right in front of me. So he had like 5 minutes more than I did to adjust to it. By the time I got there, like he is like in a whole nother, I don't know. He was just a funny guy. So he is kind of like rolling around, like joking about it. I'm bawling. And then like, other runners keep like coming in, you know, like there was, I think 16 behind us that timed out too there. So yeah, I got my emotional support volunteer sitting beside me. The rest of the volunteers are cleaning things up, and then we're just kind of waiting for our ride. And because of those road closures, which is why our crews couldn't be there, it took maybe what they say 2 hours to get back to Auburn. So once they get the aid station cleaned up and once everybody's ready to go, then you get in a car and you have to drive 2 hours back to get to your crew. So it was a long afternoon for sure, but it gave everybody some time, I think, to process it on
Yeah.
their own, which
Yeah.
was good. Too, before like service came back and my phone starts lighting up with everybody texting. And
yeah. What was that car ride back? I mean, I assume you're with a bunch of other runners too, right? Like
yeah,
you guys belong to a select group of people, right? You guys have this bond together. What's it like?
yeah. So it was first in, first out with the people that timed out. So Brian and I got to go in the first car out. It was 3 volunteers, and then Brian and I. And most of the time, it was better to just keep the focus on the volunteers of like, oh, what races do you have up? Tunnel Hill? We've done Tunnel Hill. We love Tunnel Hill. Like, let's talk about you. Like, I don't want to talk about me. I don't want to talk about anything that just happened. So most of the car ride was truly spent talking about them and their upcoming races, because they're coming to the Midwest. And so Brian and I are from the Midwest. We're like, we'll talk about all the races you want. But every now and then, of course, like Brian and I would segue back into like what we did wrong and how we got here. And there were times I would like well up again and he would just smack me like really hard in the car and be like, stop crying. So I'm like, okay, I'm fine. And then he'd like joke about something else, you know, and try to turn it around. He said he was going to start doing 5Ks. Like he was done. He's just going back to 5Ks and try to win his age group. That was how he was facing it. So yeah, it was a fun car ride, really. I mean, it was as fun as it could be. Again, we didn't talk about it too much because the minute we would start talking about it, it would start going into a dark place, and then we had to change the subject.
So then you get out in Auburn. It was in Auburn you saw your family?
Yeah. Yep.
That is a damn long car ride.
Yeah. Yep.
Because then you got like, I guess you probably popped up on 80, right? So okay, good. So what's that like when you see your fam? And you've got your husband and 3 boys with you.
I do. Yeah, my crew got there first. So that was kind of good to just have like the adults there to kind of talk about it, right? And do all the like, I'm really sorry, guys, you know, blah, 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 kind of have those conversations. And then, and I was holding it together really well, right? Because we're all adults. We all understand what's happening. But then when my kids came, they had stopped on the way and picked flowers for me, like wildflowers. And the only thing they had to put them in was a sock because I have 3 boys and their socks everywhere. Right? So they don't like have, I don't know, they don't have a cup or anything. So they show up with like these wildflowers and a dirty sock. And it was like the sweetest thing. But there again, like I like start to well up again, because that was what I wanted my finish line to be, right? It was like with my little guys and going across. But they were wonderful, and I think, little people, just like adults, don't really know what to say, right? So they were pretty quiet and like, you did a great job, Mom, we're proud of you, all that kind of stuff. But it was pretty somber, nobody, they said nobody really knows what to say in that case, but they were super sweet and yeah, really, really good about it.
Um, so what is your, I guess, did you have any takeaways or kind of learn anything about yourself in this experience? It's a
Oh
lot.
yeah,
It's a lot.
for sure. Like I said, it wasn't my first DNF, but my first DNF felt very different than this. And it's good to have two now, because I can compare and contrast, right? The different experiences. But yeah, this one for sure. First of all, just being in the back of the pack, right? Like that's a very different experience, I think, that I've had before, and being alone so early in the race. Like you're very used to being alone later in the race, and that's always going to happen. Um, so just kind of that appreciation of how lonely it can be in the back, right? And how different it feels when there are people up there just crushing it, and like you're doing your best, and you're not going to crush it, right? Like
Yeah.
you're hoping to get to not time out and get to continue the course. So there was that aspect of it. There was the fact that I could honestly say this is the first course that I would ever do to like not get a buckle. Like if they would have let me continue on my own and just done this, I wanted to see the course. I wanted to do it all. It was beautiful, and I would go out there in a heartbeat, on my own, and just try to do it on my own. So that was really good. Because again, I've never kind of felt that way. I've always been that extrinsically kind of motivated, right? Like I want the medal, and I want the finish, and I want to have the official finish. That just wasn't the feel out there at all for me. This is just beautiful. It's just a wonderful experience, and I'm just so grateful to be here for it. So those were kind of the two things. And then just like during the race, I was even thinking about like the altitude, right? Like I've done everything I can do, and this is probably my only shot, because the altitude's not going to change, and I probably won't be able to come back. And I was okay with that too, because I got to come out and do it. But then by the golden hour the next day, like, I'm talking to AJW and stuff, and he was like, well, you probably don't need to come out 2 weeks before, but if you came out 10 days before and you could find a place in Colorado, I'm like, oh, I do know someone in Colorado. And so you start planning again, right? I'm like, okay, this is one of those experiences that even though we all tell ourselves, like, we can't afford to come out 2 weeks early, we can't afford that time away, we can't afford to do it. If it's the difference between finishing and getting it done in one shot versus kind of wondering, or having to wait another 5 or 10 years to get back in on the lottery, just do it. Like do whatever you have to do if you're coming from Indiana or Massachusetts or something, to get out there early and try to deal with that altitude. So that was my other takeaway. Like, yeah, if I get into the lottery again, I am willing to do that. I'm willing to go out there, work from Colorado for 10 days, find somebody's couch to sleep on to like make this happen, because that's the only other thing I think that I could have done to be successful this year.
That is really sound advice, and a great takeaway and a lesson for all of us. I think. Are there any other stories or thoughts and feelings you want to share with us?
I saw a bear. That was pretty cool at mile 9. And it was one of those rare times when like people came up behind me and they're like, did you see the bear? I'm like, I did see the bear. They're like, we heard someone yell, we thought it was you. I was like, it was not me, but it was really cool. So that's just a sidebar. But I will say, Jessica Vanderbush probably gave me the best advice, and I got a ton of advice from really great people, right? But you don't know what's going to be the most valuable until you're actually in that situation and you've run the race and you're like, oh, this is what I should have listened to, or this is what I should have really gleaned from all this. And she said, you have to be in your absolute fittest shape. And at the time I thought, well, I've seen people do this, and I have known people that have finished this race, and I wouldn't say they were in their absolute fittest shape. But after being out there, I would say that is 100% the advice I would give everyone. Like, I don't feel that you could be a mid-pack or even back of the pack trail runner and finish states, really, or feel confident that you were going to finish it. I would say you really need to work hard to be like that top 20% in your trail running group where you are locally. Because we had Brian Kavanaugh as one of our better trail runners here, and he struggled too. He came in at 28:50, and so to see him struggle with that, and a lot of other people, right? Like a lot of really great runners had a hard day. You have to be in such good shape to deal with those things that come up, right? Like the snow, or if the altitude's going to bother you, or if the heat, right? You really have to overcompensate, I think, in your training to just really take it as far as you can and do everything possible that you can to just be a really strong runner to get out there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good advice. Um, you know, I'm proud of you for doing your best, for showing up. Lots of people can't say that they had that experience, and you just never know what's going to happen out there. But but you did the work, and that's all anyone could ask of you is to try, and you did that. So for that, and for the lessons and takeaways you have from that, sometimes that's more meaningful than a buckle. And so
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. And, I hope more than anything that you get another shot at doing it, because I know you can do it. You can do it. And I just want you to have that full experience in your life. You deserve it.
Yeah, oh, I appreciate that. And I am so grateful for UltraRunning Magazine, right, for giving me the opportunity. It's a wonderful gift that you give people, because if people don't know by now, the chances of winning the essay contest are a lot better than the lottery. So enter the essay contest, do your best, get in there. It doesn't hurt anything to try to do that. And I'm being really honest when I say, like, it was probably one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. Even though it ended early, even though I didn't get to see all of it, I wouldn't trade any of that for anything. It was wonderful. So thank you all for that. I appreciate it.
You got it. You got it. And a little bonus for you and myself. I'm looking to be in Michigan in September. So I think New Holland Brewing for some pickle pizza is in order.
Yes. Oh, that would make me so happy, because I was going to ask you if you tried it yet and what the verdict was. But yeah, if you can come get the original here with the Blue Sunday sour beer, you will be hooked. It's awesome. Wonderful.
I'm all about it. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. It was so lovely to meet you in person and your family. Thanks to your kiddo for photobombing us in our interview. It was such a highlight for me. So good.
Yeah. And I have to say his name because he's so mad that I've been on here 3 times and I've not even said his name. I get crap about it every time. So Finn Joyner, Finn, Bo, and John, who were the photo bombers at the pre-race interview. You did a great job. We love you all. Everybody loved you online.
Well, I'm going to put up a screenshot of him doing that in this interview. So if you can watch on YouTube, you can get a good shot of it.
Awesome. He will be so happy. It'll be the highlight of his day for sure.
Fantastic. Well, happy 4th of July to you and everybody, and be safe out there.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks
Bye.
so much.